Out of Ammo was a virtual reality game that, suffice to say, got quite a bit of attention back in the day, when VR was really still in its infancy. It was a game that blended tower defense gameplay with the standard wave shooting that we've all come to know and love from VR games these days, because obviously VR developers will do anything but make a game that isn't just a reinvented wave shooter. Regardless, 4 years after its release, how did the game end up? Well, let's take a look. To recap, Out of Ammo blends tower defense gameplay with wave shooting. Its main gimmick is that you can seamlessly switch between a godlike overview of the map, or you can see things from a soldier's perspective. In the aerial view, you overview the map and can place down structures and assign soldiers to them, call in artillery strikes, chopper runs, and all that. You can also, quote-unquote, possess soldiers to control them manually. You do all this in the hopes of fending off terrorists trying to take over your base. It's worth noting that Out of Ammo is a finished product, or at least it pretty much is. The last major update was in June of 2020, and the update before that was in April of 2019, so that's a 14-month difference, so, it's just safe to assume that the game's done, finished, kaput, right? Unless the devs are out to spite me, this review is probably gonna be appropriate in whatever time you're watching. I don't know, I can't see into the future. As usual, I'll be starting off this review by talking about what I liked about the game. First off, switching between aerial and ground view is very intuitive. It's very easy to alternate between both views, possessing a soldier to engage in combat, and then popping right back out to look around and manage your base, and then, going right back into ground view to really engage in combat once more. Not much to say about it, it's just very seamless. Gunplay is relatively decent, not much to note there. I do like that it's very easy to hit what you're aiming at, whether you aim down the sights or shoot from the hip. I would like to rave about the sniper rifle though. If you've ever played a VR game with a sniper rifle before, you'd know that aiming down the scope can be somewhat frustrating. A lot of times there's just too much jitter. In Out of Ammo, however, the sniper rifles are actually very stabilized. They don't move around as much. It takes some getting used to, but picking off enemies has honestly never been easier in a VR game before. And I think it says a lot when I say that mowing down enemies in a machine gun emplacement has been some of the most fun I've ever had in a VR game. Just reloading the damn thing feels awesome. I also like how the game encourages movement. I found myself backing up to take cover while reloading, swiveling around on my MG turret and looking around the sniper towers. It makes the experience, somewhat immersive. I wish I could say more good things about this game because I really did quite enjoy myself playing it. It's legitimately a somewhat fun game, but it's also pretty simple. There's really nothing more to it than set down your defenses, shoot enemies, survive for as long as you can. It's because of this simplicity that the most good I can say about this game is that it's fun. And yeah, you're really just gonna have to take my word for that, Before I talk about what I didn't like about the game, it's worth noting that the game does have an online mode. However, the game's population is very small, so it's unlikely you'll find anyone to play with. Not necessarily a con, no, the game can definitely be played offline, but, I think it's worth mentioning. But yeah, as far as what I don't like, I will say that first off, there's really no strategy to this game. It's very cool that you can switch between aerial and ground view, but when you're placing down structures, positioning soldiers, there's really nothing more to it than enemies come through here and I can shoot them from here. Aerial view serves very little utility. In Pavlov's spectator mode, you can move yourself up and down and zoom in and out for a better view of the map. It's great to be offered that sort of freedom, and the ability to do so in this game would seem like a no-brainer. However, as far as I know, no such mechanic exists for adjusting your aerial point of view, which is very disappointing. Such a mechanic would seem like a necessity. Graphically speaking, it could be better. Obviously, it's going for a very simple aesthetic, so, take that as you will. I will say though, most of the maps look like they were made in MS Paint. They feel really disgusting to play on. But I mean, other than that, they're meh. Overall, I doubt you'll find yourself too immersed in the game because the graphics are really just too simple. The maps themselves are also nothing really to write home about. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some good ones that stand out, but honestly, you'll find that besides the location, rarely is it that something actually sets the maps apart. They don't get progressively harder, they're really just all the same. The maps are neither good or bad, they're just bleh. though I do recall contending with RNG a little bit. One of the problems I've had with some of the maps is that there are a lot of choke points that you have to cover. Some maps, your base is practically in the open and vulnerable from all sides, but you're not really given the resources to defend it. Essentially, this meant that there was a chance that enemies could come through a choke point that was completely undefended. It's worth noting that this wasn't actually a problem too often, but it happened, and I think it's worth mentioning because if stuff like this is happening, well, there's a good chance that maybe you need to revise your map layouts. Speaking of maps, there are some bonus maps with unique game modes tagged on. One where you survive a helicopter crash.
Your plane was shot down behind enemy lines. Looks like you're the only survivor.
And you need to fend off waves of enemies with nothing but a pistol. A map where you play as a sniper covering a group of soldiers trying to evacuate.
We got a squad in the town square. They be pretty roughed up. Need sniper cover. That's you, while we evac the wounded.
And the game where you play as some guy hacking into a laptop and you fend off waves of enemies with a drum-fed shotgun while you hack into said laptop. I could go into detail about these games, they certainly have their fair share of flaws, but honestly, I really don't think it's worth doing. It's great that these maps exist, but these are game modes that I think that people will play once and then never again. I'm also very disappointed at the lack of a sandbox mode, like a mode where you can generally just build whatever you want, right? I just kind of feel like in a game like this, it's a no-brainer. I did say that the gunplay was pretty good, and you know, it is, but it's certainly not the best. In games like Pavlov or Boneworks, hell, even in Blood Trail, a VR game I remember as being one of the worst I've ever played, there's a visible ammo pouch often on your hip that you can draw ammunition from. I like games that have these ammo pouches. It's very reaffirming to be able to look down and have visual confirmation as to where you have to grab. Out of Ammo, however, doesn't have this. At best, this makes reloading just a little awkward, and at worst, you can actually miss mag grabs or mess up reloads. A little less worse, in other games when you interact with your weaponry, say that you're gripping the front end of your gun, your hands sort of latch onto the gun, for lack of a better description. You know, bear with me, I know I'm not being too clear, but Out of Ammo doesn't do this, so that makes handling weaponry a little more rough. Throwing grenades is also pretty weird. It's just too floaty. The grenades never end up where I want them. In fact, I've actually refrained from using grenades when I otherwise should have used them because the few times I actually tried to utilize the frickin' grenades, I killed myself with them. I kind of have some complaints with the AI. They can be pretty stupid. I'll have engineers and medics dying because they put themselves in hilariously vulnerable positions, practically running out into open fire. Soldiers are also pretty dumb. When you're not controlling them and they're controlled by the AI, they consistently fail to kill enemies right in front of them. Now, obviously, I don't want to have my soldiers be too effective, it would kill the fun of the game, but I should be able to rely on them to an extent. Now, when the enemy is out in the open and my companions can't even hit them with their fully automatic rifles, I'm sorry, it just rustles my jimmies. It also wasn't uncommon for the enemy AI to phase through my defenses, ignoring them completely, which felt unfair. The game also has a fair amount of small glitches. For one, I recall being forced out of ground mode when a Rocketeer fired their bazooka, stuff like that. Nothing too big, you can certainly deal with the bugs without the experience being hurt too much, but it is significant enough to note. I also really don't like the music either. Now look, I can contend with royalty-free music, most of the time it just feels unprofessional, but it's hard to put up with it when it's straight up blaring into my freaking ears. Jesus, learn how to use Rhythmic or something, God. Lastly, I don't think that the game has longevity, which, it's to be expected considering that it's a generic horde shooter. Now, say what you want about the game, it's essentially a VR wave game with a god mode tagged on. Honestly, it was more common for me to end the game myself than it was to enter a fail state, simply because I got that bored with the game. In fact, I really didn't spend much time sifting through my gameplay footage to find my best clips, because really, all my gameplay just looks the same. In terms of critique, I'm pretty much done here. I really wish I had more good to say about this game, other than it's fun, because overall, I really did enjoy this game to an extent, and I really feel like I should stress that. I have my issues with Out of Ammo, but I think it's worth noting that even though I have a lot of problems with the game, these problems are pretty small in the grand scheme of things. Although if anything, I think that these small problems go to show that this game is very rough around the edges, and it certainly takes away from the overall experience. It's clear to this reviewer that this game needed more polish before the developer decided that the game was ready to be finished, much less create a sequel. Out of Ammo lacks what I'd consider to be basic controls for a game in this genre, such as being able to raise and lower the camera. Maps are too generic and should have had cleverer layouts and less dependency on RNG. The guns, while intuitive, suffer from issues regarding handling and reloading, and the AI on both sides desperately needs improvement. It also lacks staying power and replayability. I doubt you'll be wanting to play this game very often. Overall, I give Out of Ammo a middling score of 5 out of 10. Overall, very mixed opinions on this game, and it really doesn't help that at the end of the day, this really is just another wave shooter, of which there are plenty on the VR market. I cannot stress that I did enjoy my time with this game somewhat, but the flaws, small as they may be, really did serve to harm the experience. As far as whether or not I recommend this game, well, I won't say that you shouldn't get it. If your interest is piqued by this game and you want to get it, I'd say hold off until it's on sale. $10 is a little much for what you get. There are better games that you can get for similar price points, but I actually got this game for $2.50 on a sale, and honestly, I think I can say that I'm satisfied with the price to performance ratio. So yeah, I think it's best that you wait for a sale. You honestly won't be missing much if you do. Friendly Fella Jed, out.